Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good to see everybody today. How's everybody? So happy to see you all today. Well, we are close to coming to the end of the seerah. Did you know that? We really are. We are on year 18. We have a lot of material to cover today. So inshallah, we're going to get started. So who remembers how many years are in the seerah? Can somebody tell me? When we're looking at the seerah, what years are we looking at? I don't think you're muted. I don't think the students are muted today. So it's a total of 23 years, right? So we are now on year number 18. In fact, what we need to do is take a peek at the Quranic years chart really quick before we go on. So we need to take a good look at that worksheet that you had from last time. Who's here? Oh, okay. The cat. Asma really missed the cat. Because Asma wasn't home last night. So she missed her cat. So, hey, Mariam, I see Mariam. Oh my goodness, I still need to show Mariam's cake pops. I promise. As soon as I download that picture, Mariam, I've been meaning to show your awesome cake pops that you brought me. But anyways, okay. So let's look right here. This is the Quranic years chart right here. So on this one, which was the third section that we're not only ending today, but we're also going on to the fourth section. So the third section, remember that year 13 was the Hijrah, year 14 was the raids, okay, the caravan raids. Year 15 was the Battle of Badr. Year 16 was the Battle of Uhud. Year 17 was the Battle of Badr II. Remember the one where the Quraysh didn't show up. And then we're going to talk today about the Battle of the Trench, which is year 18. So we have here that third little section, and then we're going to be starting the fourth section as well this time, which is Hudaybiyah, and then we're barely going to start the conquest of Mecca, but then that only gives us a couple of more years to talk about tomorrow. So tomorrow, inshallah, we're just going to do, Tabuk, year of delegations, and farewell Hajj, which only takes us up to 23 years. That's all there is in the entire seerah. So I think what we'll probably do, because a lot of information, we'll do conquest of Mecca starting tomorrow and go all the way to farewell Hajj. So that's where we are. And inshallah, tomorrow I will definitely show you some colored printouts of those last two quarters. You do already have the empty ones with you. So all you have to do is color them and take notes. All right, let's start. All right, so we are now on Battle of the Trench. So if you go to section 18, year 18, those of you who have the book, we're on page 251. So Bismillah, okay? So here we know that there was 3 failures that the Quraysh had militarily experienced. So the first failure was Badr, okay, and we know that they completely failed at that. They also, at Uhud, they failed to destroy the Muslims. That's how they failed at Uhud. And then the second Badr is where they, that was a failure for them too. That's 3 different failures that the Quraysh had experienced. So they were just getting all this tension was boiling inside of the inside of the Quraysh, because they had never succeeded really. They had never succeeded in demolishing the Muslims. And so what we have here is this plan that they make as a final all-out assault on Medina. And so what they do is I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted here. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of noise around me. All right, so from the safety of their new abode in Khaybar, the exiled Banu Nadir. So remember, the Banu Nadir were exiled to Khaybar. So what they did is the Banu Nadir ally with the Quraysh, and they tell them that the Meccan way of idolatry is closer to the truth than Islam. So the Banu Nadir basically are telling the Quraysh, hey, we like your way better than Islam. And so they are kind of trying to form this alliance with the Quraysh. And then the Quraysh not only have them, but they also have, they're getting the help of the Hawazin and Ghatafan tribes. So the Quraysh is getting three-way help, okay, from three different tribes. And they end up getting this assembly, which is 3 times the size of Abu Sufyan's army. So if you remember, Abu Sufyan's army had like 3,000, right? That was already pretty big. Now what's happening is the Quraysh are forming alliances. They're forming alliances with other tribes. So what does that mean? They not only have their own manpower, they're basically saying this tribe, this tribe, this tribe. Now they're going to have a huge number. So if you look at this little chart at page 251, this is all the tribes that are like joining alliances, and that basically gives them like 10,000 people. So this is 2 years after Uhud. Okay, 2 years after Uhud, the Quraysh launched a multilateral offensive in Medina. Okay, and they persuaded the northern and eastern allies to attack the city by guaranteeing vast spoils of war. So the way that they convinced these other clans to help them is they promised them that if they helped them, that they would give them a lot of material gain from that war. Okay, so the Quraysh had assembled here 4,000 men. Okay, 4,000 men that were reinforced by the tribe of Ghatafan, and that in itself dispatched 2,000 soldiers, Banu Asad's 1,000 men, and Banu Sulaim's 700 mercenaries. So basically, you have 10,000 total people here that are against the Muslims, right? So this is what the Quraysh were planning to do together. So next, page 252. So there's many tribes that were invited to attack Medina. So what's going on basically, for those of you that just joined, that the Quraysh and the Makkans basically were never fully successful in destroying the Muslims, right? And so what they decide to do is they just want to finish off the Muslims once and for all. So then what they do is they form these alliances with a variety of different clans so that they can go and attack the Muslims in Medina, okay? So one of the inland tribes invited to attack Medina is Banu Amir, the clan of the Prophet's late wife Zainab bint Khuzaymah. Okay, so that tribe actually refuses to fight the Prophet because, the Prophet's wife was part of that tribe. So they're one of the tribes that refuses to fight, and they stay behind. And Surah Ahzab addresses this on verse 22. We're right now on page 252, kind of in the middle. And Surah Ahzab says, indeed, when the believers in the city of Medina saw the allied forces approaching in the distance to attack, they said, this is what God and his messenger promised would happen. And God and his messenger told us the truth. The specter of desperate battle did no more than increase their faith and submission to God. So then what happens is Salman al-Farisi, we know that he was that famous, man who basically came to look for the Prophet. So they only have 1 week before this attack. They learn about this attack that's going to happen. They have 1 week. And so Salman al-Farisi is one of the advisors to the Prophet, and he gives this idea to dig a trench, because you see the Muslims are now going to be on the defensive. Okay, the others are coming, their enemies are coming to attack them. How are they going to protect themselves when there's 10,000 people coming? And so you have Salman al-Farisi's idea of digging a trench along the city's most vulnerable borders to hold off the enemy's cavalry. Okay, and so what happens is they decide that's what they're going to do. So the Prophet jumps into this idea with his companions to loosen up the dirt, haul it away, and the entire city's in danger. There's a Jewish tribe of Qurayza that also lends its excavating equipment to speed up the dig. So everybody is helping to dig, even the women and children are allowed, but there's 2 youth, these 2 15-year-olds, Osama ibn Zayd and Abdullah ibn Umar, they're granted special permission to join the army if fighting happens, okay? We go underneath the tan box on page 253. So while they're digging, there's a huge rock that no one can move. But when the Prophet crushes it with 3 successive blows, it sends a flash of lightning. It's kind of a miracle. It sends a flash of lightning north, south, and east. So Salman al-Farisi asks him about what is the significance of that? What does that mean? And the Prophet explains that God will soon grant the Prophet control over Yemen to the south, Syria to the north, and Persia to the east. So that is kind of, and that is one story that I had not heard before, actually. And so that was kind of new to me. Yes. So yes, so the next thing is about the siege. Once I have to listen to my chief advisor, Asma. She is like the one who's super smart. Okay, 18.3, the siege. So this is what happens. Abu Sufyan leads the Confederate army to the northwest Medinan valley of Aqiq. As with Uhud, Khalid ibn Walid and Ikramah ibn Abi Jahl lead the left and right battalion. So you have three. Oh, somebody's trying to get in here. Yeah, so you have three different, battalions, and they are headed towards Yathrib. The Meccans had never seen a trench such as this one before, and the first few attacks are easily repelled by Prophet Muhammad's archers that are lined up behind the expansive ditch. So one of the military benefits of having these trenches is that the Prophet Muhammad can, his archers can easily line up behind the ditch and shoot, so then they're safe, okay? And so the unexpected obstacle forces the Quraysh to regroup, and after reconsidering their options, they agree to plan a mastermind. They agree to a plan that the masterminded Banu Nadir chief Huway ibn Aqab decides to do. So this is, one of the chiefs makes up a plan, which is what he's going to do is he's actually going to go and try to convince one of the alliance tribes to break their alliance with the Prophet. Okay, so what he does is this. Huway convinces them that he can persuade Bani Qurayza to turn against the Prophet. By drawing the Prophet's attention to Bani Qurayza's rebellion at the southern border, he argues that the Quraysh will be able to breach Medina's much weakened northern defense. Huway approaches the chief of Qurayza, Ka'ab ibn Asad, and urges him to turn on his own city. At first, Ka'ab is reluctant, but Huway finally persuades him, and the rest of Qurayza is open to Medina's southern border to the allied enemy's forces. So just realize what has happened here. So just long story short, the way that the Prophet tried to protect himself is he dug these trenches on some sides of the city, and the other sides, he tried to form alliances with some of these Jewish tribes so that they would kind of protect him, protect the Muslims from, they would stop the enemy forces from coming in. But what this guy did is, this guy, Huway ibn Aqtab, he went and talked to some of the protecting guys, Bani Qurayza, and told them to turn against the Prophet, right? So the Prophet is thinking that I have a protector, but then that person turns against him. So then what happens is it allows the Meccans to then enter from that side, okay? So if you look at this chart on 254, you look at 254, you can see a little bit more detail about the Battle of the Trench. It's a nice chart. Inshallah, once I get my document camera, I can let you see it in more detail. So then we go on to page 255. The Prophet learns about Qurayza's treachery and, as expected, sends reinforcements to the south. So what happens? Basically, the Prophet then has to go protect himself by sending his own people to the south because he learns that this tribe has betrayed him. And with fewer men defending the northern trench, the Quraysh try to attack once more but cannot cross the divide. The Muslims diligently hold on to their ranks all through the night, and the next day, for the moment, the trench appears to all that is preventing the imminent collapse of Medina. And during this standoff, the companions miss their obligatory prayers. Only after the enemy retreats for the evening can they make up their prayers that they missed. Then we have this huge passage from Surah Ahzab on page 255 that I'll read quickly. It says, the enemy came upon you from above you and below you, eyes lost hope, hearts left up to the throats. As some of you imagined all sorts of treacherous thoughts against God, this was traumatic for the faithful, and they were shaken with intense trembling. The hypocrites and the sick heart panicked and cried out, God and his messenger have promised us nothing more than a fantasy. Some of them said, people of Yathrib, you can't withstand this assault. Pull back now and protect your own homes. It actually goes on for the rest of the page. Because of time, I'm not going to read all of that to you, and you can read that yourself. Go to page 256. Okay, if you go to page 256, the Prophet suggests negotiating with Bani Ghatafan and tells Uthman ibn Affan to draw up a treaty. But before the plan comes into fruition, Saad persuades the Prophet not to negotiate with their longtime enemies. So the Prophet is kind of getting hope, a little bit hopeless because, the fighting is still happening. And so he's thinking about drawing up a treaty with one of the, tribes, Bani Ghatafan. But then Uthman ibn Affan says, don't trust them. And then we go on where it says, meanwhile, one of the Quraysh's prominent allies, Nu'aym ibn Masud, secretly defects the Muslim camp and accepts Islam. So one of the Quraysh's allies secretly accepts Islam, but the Quraysh don't know that. Then he goes, the Prophet instructs this leader, Nu'aym, to return to the enemy and try to turn them against themselves. He grants Nu'aym permission to lie, explaining that war is deception. So the Quraysh don't realize that this man is actually Muslim. So this man goes back and tries to break up the Quraysh, who has, made allies with a lot of the other groups. Okay, and then Nu'aym advises the Bani Qurayza to ask the Quraysh for some of their leaders as hostages. He explains that if the Quraysh lose, they will not flee back to Mecca and abandon their leaders to the Muslims. Then Nu'aym approaches the Quraysh and tells them the Bani Qurayza have re-allied themselves with the Muslims and will ask for the Quraysh leaders as hostages, intending to hand them over the other requests. And in little time, Abu Sufyan is convinced that Bani Qurayza will turn on the Quraysh just as he had turned on the Prophet. Okay, so then we go to page 257. When Quraysh's allies, Ghatafan, Sulaym, and Asad, had agreed to join the siege on Medina, they were motivated by the prospect of plundering the city's abundant resources. Okay, so why did all these clans agree to help the Meccans? What do they have to get out of it? What they had is this idea that they would gain the city's abundant resources, right? I mean, why would they go and risk their life? So what happened, though, is over the next couple of weeks, there was no results coming from this war. And so then everybody's determination kind of goes down, right? And so here it says 2 weeks have passed. Everybody's determination quickly starts to fade. So then the Prophet makes a dua to Allah, which is in Surah Ahzab, verse 9. He says, all of you who believe, so it says this, all of you who believe, remember the favor of God upon you when an overwhelming horde of enemies came down upon you to attack you at Medina. We let loose against them a fierce desert sandstorm and other forces you couldn't even see, for God is watching everything you do. So what happens is this big storm happens, okay? And the cold raging winds devastate the enemy campsite. So Allah basically sends a storm to help the Muslims, and this devastates the enemy campsite, ripping up the tents, extinguishing fires, okay? And so then the enemy is forced to salvage whatever's left from their camp and return home. And it also, it just wipes out any hopes that the Quraysh had to move forward with this. We go to 18.4, the execution of Bani Qurayza. The enemy forces leave at dawn, and by early afternoon, Jibril instructs the Prophet to confront Bani Qurayza for their treachery. The Prophet sends 3,000 troops to the Jewish fortress, but instructs them not to pray. Basically, what happens is he tells them not to pray, and then there was like a difference of opinion. Some of them prayed, some of them didn't. And then we go to the next page. 258. I think we're on 258. And then what happens is Bani Qurayza's entire enclave is surrounded by troops led by Ali ibn Abi Talib. After a 25-day standoff, the leaders of Qurayza reach out to their other liaisons, Abu Lubaba ibn Abdul Mundir, and ask if surrendering to the Prophet would afford them some leniency offered to Bani Qaynuqa and Nadir. Abu Lubaba instructs them to surrender, but as he does so, he points out his neck and says that they will still not be forgiven. Moving further down the page, in the Qurayza enclave, one of the men, Amr ibn Su'ada, officially dissociates himself from his people for breaking their pact with the Prophet. He suggests his clansmen that they embrace the Prophet's religion. So basically there's this man, Amr ibn Su'ada, and this is part of the Qurayza clan, that he says, why did you guys break the pact with the Prophet? You should accept his religion. But the Qurayza refuse that. This man, Amr ibn Su'ada, says either accept Islam or pay the jizya. But the Qurayza refused both ideas, and they said they'd rather be killed than pay money. Okay, the next page, 259, Banu Qurayza surrenders, and the men quickly separate. So when they surrender, the men are separated from the women. The men are basically, killed. And so Abdullah ibn Salam, which is the former rabbi of Banu Qaynuqa, is in charge of the women and children. And yes, and so just as the Khazraj had asked for leniency for Banu Qaynuqa after Badr, the Aus sent a deputation to the Prophet asking him to show clemency for their former allies. The Prophet listens to their plea and asks them, would you rather have your fate, meaning the fate of Banu Qurayza, in the hands of an Aus chief, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh? The Aus agree. So the Prophet proposes that their leader is lenient with the Qurayza, but Banu Sa'ad he was not lenient. He was uncompromising in justice, and he orders that the Qurayza fighters be executed while their women, children, and property is spared. Okay, we go to the next. And this is actually, if you look at the bottom of 261, this entire thing is in Surah Ahzab, verse 26 to 27. I'll let you read that on your own. Look at 262. This was all called the Battle of the Trench. Whatever we talked about so far, this is the Battle of the Trench. And Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh passes away. He's buried, and it says that somebody named Abu Lubaba tied himself to the mosque. And that's just, he tied himself to the mosque. In 18.5, 5 months after the Battle of the Trench, Zayd ibn Haritha leads an expedition that successfully intercepts a southbound caravan belonging to Safwan ibn Umayyah. While a number of the Meccans are taken captive, Abu As ibn Arabi somehow escapes to Medina to visit his wife Zainab and daughter Umama. Okay, and so basically this is what happens. Zainab surprised the congregation by announcing she's officially protecting Abu As, who's staying with her in Medina, but the Prophet accepts his daughter, but emphasizes their marriage is void because Abu As has not yet accepted Islam. Let's look at 18.6. It's called the Mustaliq invasion. Okay, so the loss of Abu Sufyan's caravan prompts the Quraysh to rally support from their allies along the Red Sea coast to reopen their western caravan route. When the Prophet learns of their plans, he leads a group of men to the coast and preemptively encircles Banu Mustaliq, who had been planning to raid on Medina. Although the two parties exchange vows, a little actual fighting takes place and Banu Mustaliq is quickly subdued by the Prophet's army. After Banu Mustaliq surrendered, Juwayriyah bin Harith, the daughter of the chief, approaches the Prophet. She wants to be ransomed, but instead the Prophet says, he offers a hand in marriage. So Juwayriyah accepts. So this is, and in this section, you're going to learn about many of the wives of the Prophet that he marries. So this one, Juwayriyah accepts his hand in marriage. So Harith ibn Durar is struck by the Prophet's, he's the father of Juwayriyah, and he basically consents to the marriage. That means he says yes. And so by marrying this woman, there is a strong bond between Medina and this coastal tribe. Upon the Prophet's marriage to Juwayriyah, the companions willingly free more than 100 captive families from Juwayriyah's clan. So that is, so she really ends up, that marriage is a blessing for her clan. And in fact, Aisha said, I know of no other woman who's a greater blessing to her people than she. So basically that marriage was, had some political benefits. Let's go to the next page. Actually, not 264 or 5, but let's go to 266. We're going to talk about something called Aisha's trial. Aisha's trial. So what happens is Aisha radiallahu anha is only 14 years old, and during the return march to Medina, she misplaces a necklace that her mother gave her as a wedding gift. So when the caravan is ordered to, and this happens when the caravan stops, and already Abu Bakr, her father, already kind of scolds her. But then what happens is the Quran responds to the following verse. So we have Surah An-Nisa, verse 43 says, don't pray in a state of ritual impurity. So they had stopped in order to wash up for the next prayer, because this verse was revealed where Allah says, don't pray in a state of ritual impurity unless you're on the road traveling until you've washed your whole body. It goes on, so on and so forth. So that's why the caravan stopped to wash up. But then when Aisha, what happens is when Aisha's camel rises, she finds her necklace underneath. And then at the next oasis where they stop, she loses it again. When she goes to look for it, the caravan leaves without her. And so she returns to an empty camp and falls asleep while she was waiting, because this 14-year-old girl, there's nobody left. What is she going to do? She falls asleep while she's waiting. And then this guy named Safwan ibn Mu'attal, he had also fallen behind. He was trying to catch up with the caravan. And he suddenly sees the Prophet's young wife sleeping alone in the desert. And he's like, what are you doing, left behind? And so he offers his camel to her and he just walks. And then Aisha returns to Medina and she stays with her parents to recover from an illness during the journey. But there is a rumor that had spread about her regarding her and Safwan.
Miss Mona?
And her aunt actually leaks that rumor. Did somebody say something? Yes, Arisa?
Is Aisha radiallahu anha already married to the Prophet?
Yes. That is a very good question. So Aisha's already married to the Prophet. I know she's 14, but she married like 5 years before that. So she was already married to the Prophet, okay? And so what happened is her own aunt accidentally leaks this gossip. And so Aisha is devastated because she's a chaste woman and people are saying that she was like, with this man. And so meanwhile, the Prophet seeks the opinion of his household on the matter, and everybody is defending Aisha. Okay, everybody is saying, hey, she's a good girl. Osama, his mother, Ayman, shower Aisha with praise. And Ali, however, gives a more calculated response. He says, God hath not restricted thee, and there are many other women besides her, but question her maidservant and she will tell the truth. So Ali tells the Prophet, why don't you ask the maidservant about her character? So it's kind of a little funny because the only fault the maidservant can find from Aisha is that, when she was a child, she used to knead some dough and then she would fall asleep and then her lamb would eat the dough. And that's like the only problem she could find with Aisha. The next page, 267, the next day, the Prophet ascends his pulpit and defends his wife's honor. Then the Aus, there's one man, Usayd ibn Hudayr of the Aus, who openly swears to punish anybody from Aus or Khazraj who spread rumors about the Prophet's family. Most of the men involved with the rumors are Khazraji men. So upon hearing Usayd's announcement, Sa'd ibn Ubadah promptly accuses him of lying and says that no one from Aus would be allowed to punish any man of Khazraj. He swears that Usayd wouldn't be making such declarations had any of the people involved the rumor been of Aus. Okay, we go down. And then next paragraph, all this time Aisha doesn't realize that the Prophet is defending her. And if we go down, Surah Ma'idah, verse 102 and 101 and 102 says, all of you who believe, do not question about trivial things that would be difficult for you if they were explained to you in detail. However, if you ask about religious stipulations when the Quran is being revealed, then they'll be clarified to you. God pardons that kind of appropriate questioning, for God is forgiving and forbearing. Some people, before you question their messengers incessantly like that, and eventually fell into the rejection of God. Anyways, it goes on and on. It gives a few passages. It says, so the Prophet, it says, asks his wife to declare her innocence of guilt, her innocence or guilt. Aisha is speechless and turns to her parents for help. But when Abu Bakr and Rahman are unable to answer the Prophet, Aisha cries, should I tell you I'm innocent and Allah knows that I'm surely innocent, you will not believe me. And if I were to admit something of which Allah knows I am innocent, you will believe me. So there is nothing for me and you except the words of the father of Prophet Yusuf. So that is just some dialogue that happened between them. Let's go to Surah 268. They sit in the silence and Surah Nur comes down, verse 11 to 17. Okay, Surah 11 to 17. So here it says, it directly addresses this issue. It says, those who brought down slanderous charges of adultery against the Prophet's wife Aisha are nothing more than a gang among you who tried to stir up trouble. Don't think of this as a bad thing, however, for it was ultimately a good thing for you that this issue was dealt with openly. Every man among them will have his sin recorded, and the one who was the most involved will have a terrible punishment from God. There's like 4 more paragraphs that I'm going to let you read due to time. We're going to go to 269. After the Aisha's incident, after this exoneration, Abu Bakr swears to withhold charity to Mista ibn Uthatha, but then he changes that because there's more from Surah Nur that says not to do that. And then the Prophet still shows great generosity to Hassan ibn Thabit and others who repented after spreading the rumors about his family. He also forgives Hamna bint Jahash and later marries her to Talha ibn Ubaidullah. And we have a student in this class named Hamna. So shout out to Hamna. Okay, next we have page 270. This was, the end of a certain, this was the end of the necklace scandal. And then on page 271, we have a really beautiful chart of the Prophet's family at the age of 58. I'm going to let you look at that yourself due to time. It's a very nice chart. It's getting closer to the end of his life, and you can always fill in the worksheet to help learn about that. Let's go to the next page. We are now going into late Medina. We have ended early Medina. Let's talk about Hudaybiyah. So 19.1, so we're in the year 19. Shortly after the end of Ramadan, the Prophet experiences a dream that instructs him to lead Umrah. He relates this vision to his companions, and soon a group of more than 1,000 pilgrims and 70 sacrificial camels are assembled for the journey to Mecca. Umar suggests that the men travel fully armed, but the Prophet insists that they only travel as pilgrims. We go down to the middle of the page. The Prophet stops the caravan in the valley of Hudaybiyah. He sets up a camp, and the wells are dry, but then the Prophet miraculously causes the wells to fill up with enough water for all the pilgrims and animals. Okay, and somebody, Abdullah ibn Ubay is drinking, and a clansman asks him how many more miracles he needs to witness to become a believer. So, just kind of questioning, the believers were, questioning outsiders, what do you need to become a believer? So then the local tribe of Khuzā provides for these pilgrims for their daily needs. They have not yet entered Islam, but they allied themselves with the Prophet to counterbalance the strong alliance that their rival Banu Bakr shared with the Quraysh. And then we have one of the Khuzā leaders, Budayl ibn Waraqah, is visiting Mecca at this time, and when he hears about the Prophet's pilgrimage, he rides to Hudaybiyah to warn him that the Quraysh will not allow the pilgrims to enter the sanctuary, okay? So that's the point is that the Prophet is going to Umrah, right? He's going from Medina to Mecca, but then he finds out that he's not going to be allowed to enter. Okay, so Budayl ibn Waraqah, he is visiting and he hears, and he tells him that the Quraysh will not allow him to enter. It says, the Prophet instructs Budayl to return to Mecca with a message of peace. He says, that, this is what the Prophet says for him to say, we came not here for battle, we came only to make our pilgrimage, our pilgrim rounds about the house. He that standeth in our way, him we shall fight, but I will grant them time, if they so desire it, take their precautions and to leave the way clear for us. So he's requesting that they're allowed to do their pilgrimage without without having trouble. The Quraysh ignore this message, and they send a scout to Hudaybiyah by the name of Hulays ibn Alqamah, who's a powerful man who commanded all of Makkah's Bedouin allies, who are called Ahabish, okay? So all of the Bedouins, the allies are called Ahabish. So when Hulays returns to Mecca, confirming Budayl's report that the pilgrims have come in peace, the Quraysh scoff at him, saying, he's a simple nomad, he doesn't understand the complexity of city politics. And so this condensation does not sit well with Hulays, and he responds that either the Quraysh allow the pilgrims to enter the sanctuary, or all of the Ahabish are going to forego their alliance with Mecca. Next paragraph, Urwa ibn Masud, a man from Bani Thaqif, also happens to be in Mecca during this time, and when the Quraysh ignore the advice of the first two scouts, Urwa offers to meet with the Prophet and confirm what Budayl observed. After visiting the Muslim camp, Urwa returns to Mecca in a complete awe of the Prophet, and he advises the Quraysh, I have been sent to Khosros, Caesar, and Negus in their kingdoms, but never have I seen a king among the people like Muhammad among his companions. They will not abandon him for anything in case. Now he now offers you a reasonable plan, so do what you please. Also, eager to disrupt any chance of a truce between the Meccan and Medinans, a group of approximately 70 young Meccans try to ambush the pilgrims' camp. However, their plan is foiled by Muhammad ibn Maslama, whom the Prophet had placed in charge of the camp's security. The Meccans' party is taken captive, but as described in Surah Fat, the Prophet makes a gesture by releasing them back to the Quraysh. So we have a passage from Surah Fat, verse 24. It says, he is the one who restrained their hands from you and your hands from them, right in the midst of their own territory of Mecca. Then afterwards he gave you victory over them, and God is watching whatever you do. Next, the Prophet dispatches Khirash ibn Umayy to negotiate on their behalf. But Khirash, after nearly being killed in Mecca, returns to Hudaybiyah, instructing the Prophet to send someone better. And so then the Prophet responds that Umar, suggests Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar says that Uthman is a better and more powerful person than he is, and Uthman is unable to negotiate a deal. The Quraysh offer him an opportunity to perform the pilgrimage by himself, but he says, no, you have to first allow the Prophet to come and perform the pilgrimage. I will not perform it by myself. So then we go on to 19.2. We are now in the 19th year of the prophethood, the Pact of Allegiance, page 277. Having an impasse with Uthman and Abdullah ibn Ubay, the Quraysh send 3 men, Suhail ibn Amr al-Amiri, Mikhraj ibn Hafs, and Huwayth ibn Abdul Uzza to negotiate a treaty with the Prophet. Okay? And so just before the negotiations, the Prophet receives an inspiration instructing him to first renew a pact of allegiance with the companions. Sitting under the shade of an acacia tree, he shakes each pilgrim's hand. So what he does is before he makes this pact with the Makkans, he first renews his pledge with the companions. This is called the Pact of Ridwan, or the Pact of Allegiance, okay? So he basically shakes each pilgrim's hand as they pledge their allegiance to him, and this is called Pact of Ridwan. Uthman has not returned from Mecca yet. The Prophet takes his own left hand in his right and makes the pledge on his behalf. And then we have once again, Surah Fath, verse 18, where it says, God's good pleasure was upon the believers when they pledged their allegiance to you under the tree. He knew what was in their hearts, and he sent tranquility upon them and rewarded them with a quick victory, though the signing of the truce deal. So, it's basically acknowledging this treaty. It was mentioned in the Quran. We go on to 19.3, the treaty and its reception. So the treaty between Prophet Muhammad, the Muslims, and the Makkans, it started with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, but then Suhail responds that he doesn't know what Rahman and Rahim. He demands that the document simply say Bismika Allahumma instead, which is in the name of thy God. The Prophet consents to his request, and then he says, this is what the messenger, Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, has agreed with Suhail ibn Amr. But then Suhail insists on rephrasing it. Instead of saying messenger of Allah, he wants him to say Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, right? Because they're not acknowledging him as the prophet of Allah, but they do acknowledge that he is the son of Abdullah. So then the Prophet again yields his objection and asks Ali to strike out messenger of God. And Ali doesn't want to strike that out. So he says, okay, Ali says, okay, Prophet, if you want to do that yourself, you can. I cannot cross that out of the treaty. So then the Prophet, he struck it out himself and replaces it with Muhammad ibn Abdullah. We go to the next page where we are detailed the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. This is called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah between the Muslims and the Quraysh. So I'm going to read this to you, and then at the bottom of the page it's like listed, right? So it says, in the name of thy God, this is the treaty which Muhammad bin Abdullah has made with Suhail bin Amr. They agreed to remove war from the people for 10 years. During this time, the people are to be in security and no one is to lay hands on another. Whoever of Quraysh comes to Muhammad without the permission of his protector or guardian, Muhammad is sent back to them. Whoever of those with Muhammad comes to Quraysh is not to be sent back to him. Between us, evil is to be abstained from, and there is to be no raiding or spoliation. Whoever wants to enter into a covenant and alliance with Muhammad is to do so, and whoever wants to enter into a covenant and alliance with Quraysh is to do so. You are to withdraw from us this year and not to enter Makkah against us. And when next year you come, we shall go out in front of you, and you shall enter it Makkah with your companions and remain in it 3 days, and you shall have the arms of the rider swords on scabbards. You shall not enter it bearing anything else. Okay, so a quick look at this nice little chart at the bottom of this page, which details the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. If you have the book, you can see that. So here there are 7 points. Number 1, both parties agree to a conditional 10-year truce. Number 2, any Meccans who flee to Medina must return to Mecca. Number 3, any Medinans who flee to Mecca may remain in Mecca. Number 4, there will be no tolerance for treachery or subterfuge. Number 5, each city is free to make pacts with third parties. Number 6, the Muslim pilgrims will not perform their pilgrimage that year. And number 7, the Muslim pilgrims may return the following year bearing no arms except the arms of a traveler. So that is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So in addition to this pact, With the Quraysh, the Prophet renews his alliance with Banu Khuza'a, which have been generously caring for the pilgrims. Let's go on to, you can look at page 262. There's a large passage from Surah Fat, which you can read yourself. We have on page 263, or no, sorry, 283, we have Abu Basir. So after the companions returned from Hudaybiyah and Makkah, named Abu Basir Asid flees Makkah to live in Medina. The Prophet learns of his escape, and according to the treaty, he instructs him to go back home. So 2 Makkans arrive to escort Abu Basir back, but he kills one of them at the first stop outside of Medina. The other escort flees for his life, and Abu Basir travels west, settling near the Red Sea along Makkah's northern caravan route to Syria. News of this escape reaches Makkah, and soon the prisoners, including Abu Jandal ibn Suhail, Walid ibn Walid, all escape to join Abu Basir's renegade camp, and that makes up eventually 70 people. There were 70 men who began ambushing Makkah's northbound caravans. The Quraysh are unprepared for this new hostility. They approach the Prophet in search of a solution. As much as they want to punish Abu Basir and his followers, they decide to surrender them to Medina so the Prophet can hold them in terms of the treaty. Let's go down. The growth of Medina. So Medina grows a lot after the treaty. Omar divorces 2 pagan wives he had married. Let's go to the next page. So there's a death on 284. Abu Bakr's wife Rahman, which is the mother of Aisha, passes away. And news of her death reaches her son Abdul Kaaba, who comes to Medina to embrace Islam. The Prophet warmly accepts Abu Bakr's son and changes his name from Abu Kaaba, which means servant of the Kaaba, to Abdul Rahman, servant of the most merciful. Go on to the middle of the page. And in Abyssinia, Ubaidullah ibn Jahash passes away, leaving behind his wife Habiba, the daughter of Abu Sufyan. Shortly after Ubaidullah's passing, the Prophet sends a messenger to the Negus asking him to ratify the Prophet's marriage to her. He also sends the word of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib requesting that he and the remaining Muslims in Abyssinia come to Medina. During this time of relative peace, the community of Muslims nearby doubles, okay? So basically the Muslims double in number. And with all these changes happening, we have Surah Al-Mumtahina, which hints at a new breeze of reconciliation moving through Arabia. Okay, so Muslims are growing in Medina. The next section says that the Prophet then starts reaching out to other powers, to other powers surrounding the area. So a quick map on 285 shows you some of those powers. I'm gonna skim through since time is kind of running out. Let's see how far I go with this. Okay, we will try to wrap this up very soon, inshallah. So some of the powers that he invites to Islam is Emperor Heraclius via the Roman governor of Syria, Muwaqis, the Coptic ruler of Alexandria, Khosrows, the king of Persia. He also sends letters to Abyssinia, Damascus, Yamama, Oman, Bani Ghassan. Okay, so the Prophet is now telling other people about Islam. It's going further. And then we have a little story on 19.7 about somebody casting a spell on the Prophet. And so there is a man, so the year after Hudaybiyah, the inhabitants of the northern Jewish settlement of Khaybar prompts a new sorcerer named Labid to cast a spell on the Prophet. And this spell actually worked on the Prophet that made the Prophet, the Prophet begins to suffer from forgetfulness, weakness, and loss of appetite. When he prays for a cure, Allah tells him he's instructed to read Surah Al-Falaq and An-Nas and quickly regains his health, okay? And so the Prophet forgives Labid, and Labid explains that he was bribed to do this. Further down, so let's look at one of the marriages that occurs. So when the Prophet returns to Medina, he marries Safiya, who joins the household with Aisha, who is younger, and Aisha and Safiya, become friends. And basically, there's a section that kind of just talks about the wives, a little bit about the wives there. So yes, so the main point in the section about the competition with Aisha, section 19.9, that Aisha, among the 8 wives that are now in the Prophet's household, Aisha is kind of favored, and people actually kind of notice that. And so, they kind of see that Aisha is favored and they're a little bit jealous of her. So there's a little chart here that shows the Prophet's wives that you can look at. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and pause there, and we'll talk about the conquest of Makkah tomorrow, inshallah. So we'll pick up with the conquest of Makkah and go to year 23. And like I said, inshallah, tomorrow we're going to have a much bigger Kahoot to kind of review everything. And inshallah, we're going to go ahead and pause there. Jazakallah khair to all of you. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. I'll see you here inshallah tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.